programme is called Something for the Weekend. It has been created and produced by Dave Clark. It is a How production for Sound Art Radio. Right, just a slurp of the old coffee. That is good. I have to say, we got a new coffee machine the other day and it works rather well. 15 bars of pressure. Excellent. It's actually better than any other coffee you can buy. I can guarantee that. Probably because I don't put so much milk in it. I find the amount of milk that people consume these days is just incredible. So, well, you can probably guess, I've just opened the door. That's the sound of a train rattling down the old track that Isambard laid many years ago. And so it's a beautiful day, and gosh, it's a cracker. So not a cloud in the sky, totally blue sky. Bit of a haze across the valley. So quite appropriate really, because today we're going to meet someone who's called Julian Summerhayes. So maybe that's the reason why it's such a nice morning. So actually, I'm walking across now to get my bicycle, because Julian is a keen cyclist. So I'm gonna cycle over to meet him at Dartington. So it's going to be a case of denim meets lycra. Actually, I don't think Julian's going to be lycra'd up, because we're just going to take a little stroll around the estate. But I thought I'd cycle over there just to sort of get into the spirit of it, because we're gonna hear. Oh, my bike's so buried deep. We're going to hear a little bit from Julian about integrative law. I mean, he's a lawyer and he's really interested in this integrative law. So we're going to hear a little bit about that. But we're also going to hear about Julian's, what he does at the weekend, which is very often cycling. So it should be very interesting. So I'm not going to even second guess what integrative law is. I can't even say it, let alone guess it. And but it should be quite interesting to find out. So I've got to dig this bike out. It's going to take at least half an hour by the looks of things. So I'm going to be late again. Right, well that actually wasn't too bad, so managed to get the bike out, so let's get this bike on the road. Now then, what? Sounds suspiciously like a car door. It can't be, because I'm going to cycle, aren't I? Yes, I am. Right, well in actual fact I'm only half cheating, because I'm just being polite really, because we all know that it's rude to be late. So I was running a little short of time. I think I hadn't really left myself enough time to dig the old bike out of the shed, pump up the tyres. Anyway, we're on the bike. Well, I'm on the bike. What a magnificent setting Dartington is. We're very lucky to have it on our doorstep. So, how are you doing? Good to see you. What do you reckon about this?
Hey, look at that. Oh, Carlton, mate. 531. Yeah.
See? Classic. Yeah.
My grandfather had one. It's Carlton 531, actually. Yeah. Only got knocked off. I used to do quite a lot of time trialling, so that would be anywhere between 10 to 50 miles on a time trial. But what am I, nearly 50 now? I mean, time trialling in theory you should get better as you get older, but you still need to put in quite a lot of hours. So it's a time commitment thing with me. That's I just don't have the time to train for the number of hours, the number of miles for time trial. So I just ride really for pleasure now. I mean, I started my daughter off, my middle daughter Hetty, and I managed to keep up with her for about the first year of her cycling, and then I realised that the old man's heart was maxing out at about 165, 170, whereas hers was going at 200 and something.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite understand why the old man wasn't keeping up. So it's really just a pleasure thing, really. And living in Devon, I think you've got to like hills down here. I've ridden in different parts of the world, and my brother lives in Oxford, and you go to Oxford and 2 hours on the road up there and I'm bored stiff, frankly. My interest in a more spiritual approach, and I use that word quite deliberately, to work really has been there for quite a long time, because I've always had this idea that people are amazing, they're gifted, and businesses don't ever make the most of their people. They find a round peg for a round hole, and they're quite happy to leave the round peg in the round hole. Whereas I always thought, not to challenge people who didn't want to be challenged, but to try to develop people to their maximum ability. That's always been my thing. And as lawyers, we have become transactional. It doesn't really matter what you do. There's point A, point B, point C, and that's it. And what happens is that the person in all of that gets left behind. And there's been a huge amount of work done in America around the effect on lawyers psychologically and what that does to them. And really, from about 5 or 7 years into the job, a lot of them are going to be very susceptible to mental health issues. Right. And that's work has also carried on into New Zealand, Australia. So it's a known fact that if you practice as traditional lawyers, you are putting yourself in the firing line to have, episodes of depression, mental health. And I'm not saying this is as a generalism, but a lot of lawyers are sort of two people. There's one person in work and then there's somebody else outside. And a lot of people find that they resort to doing lots of things they wouldn't otherwise do. I'm pretty sure of that, whether it's drinking or just a means of escape. So the integrative law movement in the US has probably been going for 20 years, and it's a way of connecting people much more with who they are and the work they do. And I think it's challenging for a lot of lawyers because they've only ever known one way of doing it. So what I'm trying to do is to highlight that as an issue, and then start to ask lawyers some fairly difficult questions. A lot of them is, what do you actually want to do? What sort of work do you really want to do? I've ridden both the Alps and the Pyrenees, and whereas obviously there you've got anywhere between a 14 to 40 kilometre hill. Yeah. Very rarely do you get the steepness you get in Devon.
Right. Right.
So if you go up to Holm Chase, for instance, and I don't know if you've ever gone up past the hotel, there's that hill there,
right,
which isn't very long, but you try riding it's probably, it's 25%, 28% hill, whereas an average hill on the Tour de France, say, 11%.
Right.
Okay, it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
So I think, you've got to be quite strong, because, going up it once, that's okay, isn't it? But then you've got to go down the other side and go up another hill.
Sure.
A lot of good cyclists have come out of Devon. So my friend of mine, who I've known for a long time, is a guy called Colin Lewis. So Colin is president of the local club mid Devon, and his claim to fame was that he was on the same team as the late Tommy Simpson, who died on Mont Ventoux, rode in the Peugeot team, and he retired when he was 29. But I mean, his training was all done here, and there have been other cyclists, Jeremy Hunt, Yanto Barker, John Tinenlock. All these people come out of Devon. Yeah. I'm not saying there's not other parts of the country that produce them, but for a small county, proportionally, that's quite a lot of Tour de France riders. In the UK, it's very, very early days. So there is a charity in the UK called Law Care, and their principal focus is around mental health and mental well-being. And I've spoken to the chief exec of the charity, and she's hasn't yet appreciated its full impact, I think, on the profession. So in other words, things like programs that are wheeled out into universities is where I think a lot of this should start. In other words, a different conversation about what is the role of a lawyer in society. Because, I mean, law informs everything we do, whether we like it or not. You know, it's the DNA, it's the fabric of the world that we know.
Right.
I mean, it's not just about rules, it's about how those rules are applied.
Yeah.
And the conversation that needs to be had is right back at the beginning, almost in school, I suspect, with kids, saying, what do you see the role of law as being? And then if you want to go into that world of work, what do you see your role as part of that? Because the problem is, with public funding having nigh on disappeared and it being left to a very restricted number of areas, the social conscience parts of lawyers, and apart from doing pro bono work, and not many firms do that, has pretty much gone. Everybody's under the cosh in terms of targets and fees and everything else. So even in the old days, with the old school, what I describe as old school partners, they would have a group of people that they probably wouldn't charge a proper rate for, or they were doing it as, Yeah. But all that's gone, so it's just become like any other business. I think it's a great way of staying fit. It's a non-impact sport. I mean, I've done lots of sport over my lifetime, whether it's golf, racket sports, karate. But the fact with cycling is you can keep going a lot longer. And even if you don't, you've got to have the odd hip replaced or whatever, it's still a sport that allows you to do that. Okay, you might have to change the gearing on the bike. So I think it's one of those sports, because I like sport generally. I see myself carrying on practically until the bitter end. It's. I like to get out, I like to see where I live, and I think that's the thing, whether it's 10 miles or 50 miles, you can cover quite a lot of ground as well, and you get to see places that otherwise maybe you wouldn't see.
What is it in a nutshell? Is it about the lawyer, or is it about the way the lawyer does law?
It's both, I think. I think it's a challenge for lawyers to reconnect with who they really are. I think fundamentally for me, the link is, who are you? Because that's been lost in a lot of this. And I mean, people may raise their eyebrows now and think, what the hell does that mean? But ultimately, as I said before, there's two people here, and what I'm trying to get people to do is to say, what is it that really floats your boat? Because as somebody who has changed the way I practice, but has also done work that I really, really enjoy, I'm not saying I've not done my share of work that I've just had to get through. I know that it's made a significant difference to me, because it's felt connected, it's felt quite purposeful about it. Whereas I think, I'm trying not to generalise here, David, but I think a lot of people just turn up to work and go through the motions.
I was just thinking, riding a bike it's a weird thing, because it's just like riding a bike. That's what people say. Because the funny thing is, sort of some kind of magic happens. We all remember when you're a kid, the hand of somebody on your back steadying you as you wobble around and crash, thinking how impossible and implausible it is to balance on two thin wheels. And then the magic, where over a split second the world of impossibility becomes equilibrium and balance and exhilaration, as you realise somehow, through some magic, you've cracked it. And it's stranger than that, because once you've cracked it, you remember it for life. It is like riding a bike. You don't sort of forget. you don't unlearn it. And I can't think of very many other things in life that are like that, really. I suppose there are, when you think about it, but there is something a bit magical about defeating the impossible. And that's something that I think everyone on the planet who rides a bike, and let's not forget, there are a few million of those, I reckon we all share that in common. You practice, integrative law. What, as a customer, what difference would I see in the way that I sort of interact with the law firm?
I think you see the real person, and I mean, there is this issue as to, a bit like doctors, isn't it, as to whether in fact you should bring your own self into the role of lawyer. There'll be some lawyers say absolutely not. There needs to be a distance between me and the client, but ultimately I think clients value an authentic piece of advice rather than something that's just done by the letter of the law. The classic question clients will ask you is, well, what do you think? And if you just hide behind the lawyer mask and you say, well, this is what the law says, and they'll say, yeah, I know that, but what do you think? And so if you can't bring your full self to that, who the hell is advising then? Is it the faux lawyer, or is it the real person? So without being too cheesy about it, I think that the advantage of the client is that they understand who they're dealing with, not some masked marvel who's got a different face on today, but somebody who's true to who they are. Ride on the road, you can do time trialling, you can do a thing called criteriums or crits. So crits tend to be city centre racing. So when you see, and the first racing will be starting next month on the city centre racing, so around Bath or Bristol or whatever, those are our races going around a city centre as fast as you can, basically. And they are pretty hair-raising type races. So there's crits, there's stage races, so you might have a race where, like the Tour de France is over 3 weeks, we don't have a 3-week stage race over here, we might have a 5-day race or a 4-day race. Some people are drawn to the track, and there's huge amounts of disciplines on the track, so sprint, pursuiting, points racing. The difficulty living in Devon, of course, is our closest track is Newport.
Right.
So it's a 2-hour trip, well, it's a 4-hour round trip, isn't it? Because that's the other thing in this country, which is a real challenge, is you don't have road closures for racing.
Okay.
So what you have is either, for the bigger races like the Tour of Britain, a rolling road closure, so they've got motorbike outriders and cars going ahead to close the road, or the majority of races I go to with my daughter is motorbike outriders, front and back, and a few cars behind, but they are having to mix it with the cars on the road. I think you hear this expression, trusted advisor. Yeah. And I think people are more likely to trust you if they believe that what you're saying comes from the heart, that you're actually true to being who you are. And I'm not saying this is for everybody. There'll be some people who are very uncomfortable showing up as who they truly are. They're quite comfortable. It's a bit like wearing a white coat as a doctor. Some people like the stethoscope and the white coat because it gives them a degree of protection. Right. But the best doctors are the ones, I think, who bring their true self, their whole self to the role, and not just part of it. They park half of it at the door. You hear this every year with Gallup survey after Gallup survey, where people saying they're disengaged at work, and there's active disengagement or passive disengagement. And I think if you're going to enjoy your work, and we're all going to be working a lot longer, we all know that. To think that every day you come to work, you've got to leave half of yourself at the front door and go, okay, I'll just leave that half there because I can't really bring that into the workplace because nobody wants to hear that part of it. Well, you've got a whole range of people. So you'll have people who've been in the club pretty much all their life. So you've got people in their 70s and 80s who are still riding. And the way clubs work is that they try to stream the riders from A to E, let's say, so that the A group goes out and thrashes themselves to death for 3.5, 4 hours, and they're probably elite riders or close to it. And then the group at the bottom, we'd call them a social group, so they're going to go out maybe for a couple of hours, have a stop for coffee, and it's very much a social thing. It's not about how fast we go, and in between there, then you'll pick a group depending on what your average speed is. So they'll say if you go with the C group, the average speed will be 15 miles an hour, and you find your own group, because in essence you know your level, which is a great way. And the club itself has grown significantly, and it's got, I don't know, if you go there on a Sunday when the club ride is, you've probably got an average of between 60 and 70 people turning up.
And if people want to sort of get into it, how do they find out more?
I would just go and look for Devon Cycling Club, MDCC, on the website, and they'll see it's a very good website that the club supports different levels of riders. There's different events going on, which will be either sponsored by the club or they'll be just open events. There'll be a club secretary there that they can email if they're not sure what to do. It's a well-run club. To be perfectly honest. There are other clubs around, probably not as big though, because they haven't been in existence for so long. So even if you don't live over that way, there will be a club in your area which you can just go and find, and they're all run along similar lines. Because that's the way they grow their membership, and there's quite a lot of kudos in terms of your club kit and buying all that stuff. It's a bit,
the old Lycra stuff.
Yeah, it's all that. Yeah, because people like to be part of a tribe, don't they?
Yeah. So that Lycra thing is a bit weird, isn't it? Where do they turn to sort of find out more? Are there sort of resources available? Or?
It's a bit patchwork, I have to say. My entry into it was reading a book by a guy called Stephen Keeber, who was an editor or an associate editor of the American Bar Association. He wrote a book called Transforming Legal Practice. But so many of the associations, there was an association of holistic lawyers have started, and then for whatever reason haven't continued. So, my resource comes from Kim Wright mainly. She has a website. She goes under J. Kim Wright, and she's got a lot of material there. But there's quite a lot of research done in the States, so there's quite a lot of articles out there. So if you Google something like integrative law or contemplative lawyer, there's quite a lot of material out there. But it's pretty patchwork, and that's why I'm quite keen to do something about it, to try to bring all that together. So people have got, as you say, a resource or a destination point.
Do you feel like you're on a road to nowhere, or are you sort of seeing people understanding?
I could be. I could be barking mad, frankly, because there is a group of people in the UK who I've linked up with a few of them. Some are not in practice anymore, some are, but there isn't. I wouldn't describe it as a groundswell yet. I think it's up to me. That doesn't come out wrong. It's up to me and others to make a case for it, if you like, which is what I would like to do. So whether that's events or going into firms and talking to them about it, something has to change. My own personal view, and I may not be around to see that, something has to change within law and other professional services and other businesses, because we need less stuff in the world. We'll need less stuff. So the thing is, at some stage we've got to make use of all these people who've been trained to do something.
What about all this sort of stuff that people bang on about all the time, this sort of drug enhancement and the controversy that surrounds that, all the way from, the Tour de France and all the way through. What's the story there, and how's that affecting? Does it affect the local club?
I think cycling does itself no favours at all, because it never seems to be out of the press. That's the problem. So I think elite level cycling, and it's perfectly understandable. I think the general public would probably expect everybody to be on drugs, and it doesn't matter what is said. I think it's very difficult to dispel that idea because there's been so many scandals around it. I mean, I can only say from my own experience that, sure, at the elite level, I'm sure people are tempted, but for most domestic cyclists, they don't have the money. I mean, that's the reality. I'm not saying anybody is doping, but that's the reality, is they simply cannot afford some of these drugs.
Sure.
And there are cultures around Europe where people essentially have no choice. That's the other thing. I mean, without naming those places, it's just a unfortunate thing that, cycling from as early as I can remember, they took performance enhancing substance, whether it was brandy, whether they were smoking. At one stage they thought smoking was an enhancer.
Okay.
And as I say to people, you try riding a 3-week stage race, and don't tell me that certainly after week 1 of crashes and diarrhea and whatever other bug you've picked up, you don't feel completely wasted knowing you've still got 2 weeks to go.
It's a shame, isn't it, that brandy and cigarettes aren't performance enhancing.
It'd be brilliant if they were, wouldn't it?
There's a parallel universe somewhere where actually it is a performance enhancing combination. Do you remember that time when somebody was running behind you with their hand on your back and you were wobbling around?
No.
You don't remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
You proved my theory wrong then. Because so back on the old bike, back on the road. Yeah, well, that was interesting. Integrative law. It's a whole new area, but actually it's just asking those questions that somehow seem obvious, but for some reason they're sort of hard to ask. Why am I doing the work that I'm doing? What am I getting out of it? What's motivating me? And how am I sort of making the world a better place? I think a lot of people, as they commute to work and stare out the window, I think a lot of people think like that. They ask themselves those questions, but then when they walk through the door of their office or pick up the phone or speak to their colleagues, they all start to behave in a way that they feel that they need to behave to fit in, and those questions melt away until the evening commute and they sit back and stare out the window again. But Julian's out there blazing a trail, linking up with people, like-minded people, and that's all you can do. Crash! Brakes don't seem to work very well. I need to just slow down a bit. Oh my lord.
That was a How production for Sound Art Radio. For more details, please visit soundartradio.org.uk, iamthehow.co.uk. And if you want to find out more about Julian and what he offers by way of coaching and speaking, and also his role and thoughts in the whole developing area of integrative law, best channel is Twitter, and that's at J.U. Summerhayes, SUMMERHAYES, or just visit his website, which is juliansummerhayes.com. And if it's cycling you want to find out about, best place is their website. That's the Devon Cycle Club. They can be found at mdcc.org.uk. And thanks for listening.